on Idleness is a very early, very short, and very pungent snapshot of Montaigne's mind and the project as a whole that he's undertaking with writing the essays. And it's very short. But he discusses, laziness, the ability to do nothing and be okay with it. And it's a not invaluable lesson to consider under certain circumstances. And he starts off in a very curious way, discussing farming, nature, honestly. Just as fallow lands, when rich and fertile, are seen to abound in hundreds and thousands of different kinds of useless weeds, so that if we would make them do their duty, we must subdue them and keep them busy with seed specifically sown to our service. Which is curious. He's thinking in terms of nature, but also in terms of art. Farming is art, and nature is, nature. And he's saying by using the pejorative weeds that, that field would just come up with nothing, be worthless. But we need to go in and regularize it and organize it and make it super productive. Efficiency. Really? The stuff that the field would naturally produce is automatically considered weeds and of no value, and be in fact, less productive than if we were to go in and carve it into rows and plant very specific seeds in different areas and work it that way. He's not so sure. From there, he goes into a little discussion of another comparison of another natural process, that of human procreation, where he's flirting with, and maybe ironically, I'm not sure, some very misinformed science on human sexuality and the reproductive system. Put that aside. He is thinking in terms of observing nature and comparing it to what we do, and suggesting, perhaps ironically, that we follow nature more closely by observing them, drawing certain conclusions from it, that we study nature to try and alter the way we do things, the way we conduct things, the way we judge things. And he throws in a fair number of classical references here and there just because it's fun. Virgil and Horace and Martial and Lucan, they really mean very little. But then he gets to his point, because he always meanders his way to his point, and he does it again here. And he says, recently I retired to my estates, determined to devote myself as far as I could to spending what little life I have left quietly and privately. Respectable. Almost a little defensive, saying, this is what I decided to do. It seemed to me that the greatest favor I could do for my mind was to leave it in total idleness, caring for itself, concerning only with itself, calmly thinking of itself. Which sounds, that self repeated makes it seem selfish almost. We're not quite sure how to take this. And he's sort of like offering it up for our judgment, our condemnation almost. I hoped it could do that more easily from then on, his mind, since with the passage of time it had grown mature and put on weight. Which is a cute little thing, my mind had grown mature and put on weight. He's a funny guy. But I find, varium semper dant otia mentis, the quote from Lucan, idleness always produces fickle changes of mind, that, on the contrary, it bolted off like a runaway horse, taking far more trouble over itself than it ever did over anyone else. It gives birth to so many chimeras and fantastic monstrosities, one after another, without order or fitness, that, so as to contemplate at my ease their oddities and their strangeness, I began to keep a record of them, hoping in time to make my mind ashamed of itself. He's being ironic at the very end, obviously, and he's saying, well, I started writing simply to try and, show my mind that all of those meanderings, all of that chaos, all of those wild spins of fancy all over the place were pointless, they were silly, and we needed to get down to business. And he's joking. Because it is the profusion, like nature, like a untilled field. It is the profusion of thoughts that gives the richness to his work and the richness to life. And that invites the kind of inventiveness that ultimately becomes more productive and more efficient in its own way. And he's taking on that censorious tendency among society to look down their nose at people who are idle. No, we need to work. We need to early to bed, early to rise, makes healthy, wealthy, and wise. We need to work. And he's saying not necessarily. He is pointing out that there is a natural fluorescence that comes from just letting your thoughts go and seeing where the mind can find its way and what ideas can come to it. And that alone is the kind of productivity that humanity should pursue, and trying to wonder how we can straitjacket those thoughts, how we can regularize that process. Is ultimately stultifying, is counter to any notion of real productivity in the long run. The censorious tendency of humanity is an enemy to progress. And we need to let go of those culturally attenuated moral instincts, or not instincts, but habits. We need to let go of that so that we can find what's really valuable, so that we can tune into real productivity. The kind of productivity that can only come in moments of idleness.